All right, so Julian and I are going to be debating whether or not we think sanctions should be put back on Iran. And we're going to be discussing a few other things along with that, maybe going back to the Iran nuclear deal, nuclear interest in the Middle East, and everything from there on out. So my case is basically that it is in America's best interests in order to sanction Iran. And so the reasons for this are because of, bad history with Iran, going back to Hezbollah attacking us, our marine bases in Beirut, then the attack on the embassy in Kuwait. And I think I don't really have too much of an opening statement. I think that we're probably going to disagree on specific issues or on what would benefit us if it's in America's interest and stuff. So I guess I'll pass it off to you.
Okay, I can go ahead and rebut that. Of course, I'd like to hear your full argument before I present the con case. But since you've thrown a couple ideas out there, let me go ahead and rebut. So Beirut, I think that was in the 1983. Am I right? When was the embassy attacking Kuwait? The 90s.
84. They were a year apart. I don't know.
And what was Iran before the 1980s?
What do you mean? What do you mean by what was Iran?
Well, I mean their government changed, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So it was under Khomeini.
Okay, so we're in 2018 now. Why does something that happened in 1983? Why should that matter so much?
Sure. So this just goes back to, well, this is what originally got Iran listed as a state sponsor of terror, which is still in place today those were Hezbollah attacks. And so the problem there is that it's just to detail that sanction or relations between Iran and the U.S. are still very bad, and it's a still very anti-Western government. It has a lot of humanitarian rights issues, and it is in our interests to keep Iran weak, both economically and militarily, as long as the current regime is in place. And I think that as another part of why I'm for the sanctions is I think that given how the public is in Iran right now, they acknowledge the issues within their own government in terms of foreign policy dealing with the West. And I think that we're in a very unique place. We have a lot of support from Saudi Arabia, from Russia, in order to push out this regime in place of something better and more pro-Western, or at least more modern, at the very least.
Okay. You mentioned Hezbollah, and of course we're talking about the 1980s and not now, because Hezbollah, and we'll get to this later, they're actually fighting ISIS in Syria right now. But do you know how Hezbollah started?
How they started? No.
It's a village in Lebanon that was massacred during the Israeli invasion. So basically they're a militia. Of course, they're considered a terrorist group. So this initiates a conversation of what a terrorist is. But basically, they're a defense force is what I'm getting at. So I'm not trying to say anyone's a good guy or the bad guy here. Especially when you're talking about a group like Hezbollah, but I think it's important when we want to talk about because we're going to get to their influence later, and we're going back in time here to point out that they call it Hezbollah because that was a village that was massacred, and as far as like the situation in Syria goes today, it happens to just be north of the Golan Heights, which is contested because it's supposed to be part of Syria, even though it was annexed into Israel. And the next thing that President Trump's going to do on this issue, because the peace plan is going to fall apart. So the next real thing that's going to happen is he's going to recognize it as part of Israel, even though it's supposed to be part of Syria. And it almost started it started another war in 1972. But we're going to get off track here. So I can go ahead and shoot through your other points before I get to the con case. As far, I really don't think that they're like a good regime. Because I know you want to talk about this in a more general way, but I know I couldn't convince Daniel, like, because the other day I really wanted to convince him on the Palestinian issue, and I don't think I was able to do that because he was talking about a lot of winners and losers, and I was really just trying to tell him that it was more of like a human rights thing. But I don't know if I was clear enough. But like with this thing, basically, because what I want to say here is that Saudi Arabia, you're talking about Saudi Arabia and Russia. Now, I'm not really big on the Russia thing, but I mean, I think the Saudi regime is pretty evil, especially because one of Pompeo's demands, part of my con case, is that he's saying that the Iranians, they have to stop giving aid to the Houthis, for better or worse, and Yemen, because there's a terrible war on Yemen, and that Saudi Arabia is conducting, and there's other, 19 of the hijackers of the September 11 hijackers were Saudis. Mm-hmm. I think people are even trying to claim that Iran somehow connected to 9/11 when I don't think it's even disputed that Saudi Arabia was somehow connected to it. And they're the real winners of this deal. It's not really, Israel, kind of, but it's not for the reasons that are on the surface.
Right. So I don't think anybody debates the Saudi connection with 9/11 at all, but I think that it's important to notice that Iran was also funding Al-Qaeda. Do you agree with that? That's something that's, and even recently there was just an article that Iran was forced to pay, I forget the number, but it was some amount, and it was like a symbolic gesture about their essentially not complicity in 9/11, but some involvement and awareness.
Well, I know Pompeo said that too, but actually that's wrong. It's actually Saudi Arabia who's supporting Al-Qaeda, and Iran is fighting Al-Qaeda not only in Iraq now, but these proxy groups like Hezbollah, they're supporting are also fighting Al-Qaeda in Syria and ISIS in Syria, which it came out that not only that Saudi Arabia is supporting ISIS as well. So
yeah, this is we're talking about now, though.
No, this is now. Yeah, this is 2018.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so but Iranians, they're fighting Al-Qaeda. So that Pompeo was wrong. And so that was actually, part of his statement when he says that, it's false. So it's not true. That Iran doesn't support Al-Qaeda, and they don't have anything to do with 9/11. That's all Saudi Arabia.
I guess we could go into a whole thing on that, but I guess that's not super relevant here. So the problem, and I'm not here to defend Saudi Arabia. I think Saudi Arabia has funded Sunni terrorism all over the Middle East for a long time now, and I don't think that arguing that. My point is just that from America's interests, because I don't approach this in a very humanitarian moral way. I'm approaching this as we have a number of world actors, and all actors are going to act in the interest of their own country, and so our interests on behalf of the United States are to align with Saudi Arabia and Israel, even if they're doing very unethical things, whatever it could be. And you bring up the origins of Hezbollah, and I'm just saying that that's not totally relevant in that these people are still a problem to the U.S. Why they are, if there's justification for their anger, I'm not necessarily debating that at all. I'm simply saying that we have problems in the Middle East, and the most effective way of dealing with them is dealing with Iran first.
Why do you think you have to deal with Iran first?
Because Iran is easily the weakest regime in the Middle East right now, and they're very anti-American, and the public is actually, and you saw this with the last presidential election, is very interested in moving forward with the West, whereas, higher ups in Iran are not.
Because they're weak. That's a reason to pick on them. So they're weak. Like, why bother?
Well, because it's the exact same, actually the same argument as what was going on with North Korea. Is you go back 20 years to what Donald Trump was saying about North Korea, is why wouldn't we deal with them now? Because we know that this is a hostile regime to us. And so why would we put this off? Why would we allow them to gain power? Or especially now, again, when you might not be pro Saudi Arabia or Russia, but we have Saudi Arabia and Russia both saying that they'll increase oil exports to kind of counteract the economic effect on us, in order to allow us to sanction Iran without really any cost to us.
I don't think that the United States and the North Korean leader had ever met before. I'm right. I assume I'm right. Like correct me if I'm wrong here. The president of the United States and the North Korean leader have never met before.
Yeah, no.
So they wouldn't have a deal that they just threw out the window for right, because they never even met before. They didn't just sit down and negotiate a deal and then just say that make a false accusation about Al Qaeda and then another other false accusations, such as that Iran wants to wipe Israel off the map. Stop saying that when they never even said it. And even if you were going to claim that they did say that, you'd have to go back over 10 years again.
Back to Ahmadinejad. Yeah, he did. I don't think that's a very contested thing that he said that.
Sorry?
Are you saying that Ahmadinejad never said that?
Well, what he said that he didn't recognize Israel. He didn't recognize the right to exist, but they tried to twist it around and say that it shouldn't be on the map.
Right.
But he didn't mean it like I'm going to go blow it up.
No, certainly not.
They changed the meaning of it to make him sound crazy.
Right, but when Iran is pursuing nuclear weapons as a means of achieving nuclear parity with Israel mainly, or you could go back to the late 70s and it was for Iraq as well. But originally, why they pursued, they signed the NPT and I think NPT in '67, and it was it was because they wanted to pursue nukes because Israel had nukes, and I think it was '66.
Well, I mean, how are they they can't deliver a nuke to Israel, though.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily the argument. The argument is we don't want them to have this. We don't want them, and the term breakout capability is used all the time, but we don't want them to be even close to having a nuke, or we don't want them to have facilities that we can't inspect.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure, why you think the origin of them having a nuke is that Israel has them. But the thing is that they don't have a way to deliver a warhead there, and they don't really need to, because they have missiles already. They have Scud missiles, but they can't deliver a nuclear warhead. But they can still. I mean, there's ballistic missiles, so they can use them to target. They can target Israel, and they can hit Israel with these missiles. But they don't have to have a nuclear warhead. So they really don't have a reason to. They don't have a need for it. And I mean, if they needed to have it, because they did. You're right that they had a good cause for Iraq, but they don't have that cause anymore. And because we gave Iraq chemical weapons, obviously they needed something to a deterrent for that. But let's go back to this idea of them negotiating this deal, because
sure.
I think at best, I don't think they're trying to develop a weapon, but at the same time, because it would take them a year to make a weapon. Okay. So it would take them a year to do it because they gave up because of this deal that already happened. I mean, you're not going to get a better one because they gave up 90% of their uranium, and it would take them a year to build it. But they're saying that they're starting enriching more, and that because there's no deal anymore. So now they feel like it's for a regime change. They feel like they're trying to force the government out. So the worst case scenario is because now that you don't have any way to control out, that maybe in that situation. But even if they did do that, and of course this is all hypothetical, they have no way to deliver it, and they would have to test it to deliver it, right? And let me go ahead and throw this other contention out there before I get to the con argument. I lose my train of thought these days. Well, the reason why, because let me just focus on the con, because I think what this really comes down to is that this deal is negotiated. It's not a treaty. People think because the Ben Shapiro or somebody tells them that it's a treaty between the United States and Iran or something. It's not. It's a treaty through the UN between the U.S. and 5 other countries, and the 5 other countries, the EU, they need this. They have business. They're already hurting as it is. We're imposing tariffs on them. They have business they have business contracts with Iran that they can't fulfill now, and so it's not good for them, and it hurts our word as a broker. It makes the United States look bad because now it's not. We said something and then we said something else. So it makes it's not a good policy, and I don't think you're going to be able to get a better deal.
So I take issue with both of those things. I mean, which one do you want to go after first? Getting a better deal or the damage to, you're essentially saying, the United States reputability?
I better do it, but before we do that, I remember what I was going to say.
Oh, okay.
Because I know you're saying something about could inspect the sites. The IA clearly says in this deal, and it clearly says in the JCPOA that the IAEA can go into any military base if they have cause to believe that something's going on there. The IAEA says that they don't, and they say that they don't think they say that they're following the plan and they don't have any reason to believe that something's going on to investigate more. So I believe the IAEA on that.
Yeah. So the problem there is that the IAEA can't inspect anywhere. Like with suspicion, like there are places, I can't remember the names off the top of my head, but there are places in Iran that we have to actually ask Iran to inspect. And then if they say no, we have to then go to this independent council that then makes a judgment on whether or not we have it. And if we have no intel in that area, then it's really who's to say who was right and who's wrong about whether or not there's suspicion.
Well, I mean, it says that they can go to the military base. They just have reasonable suspicion to do it. And are we going to let Iran come to our military bases and inspect them? Is the whatever their grand leader, is he going to come to check out Trump's bedroom or something like that? See if Stormy Daniels is in there.
Yeah, but this is where I say that I don't come at it from a moral point of view. So I'm absolutely not saying that we're going to afford the same sort of, luxuries to Iran that we expect, because we're in a more powerful position. And, you can say it's an unethical thing and you're playing foreign policy kind of like a chess game. But if you don't do this, if you don't take advantage of advantages when you have them, then someone else will step up and it will maybe not be so kind in the future.
Well, it's not really so much a chess game as it's a non-intervention policy, which can be progressive, it can be libertarian. It pretty much goes both ways. It's basically the idea of just you don't have, but it's time to put the big stick down. We don't have any reason to interfere really. Yeah. So I don't really feel like it's a chess game. I'm just saying, like, why do anything is what I'm trying to say. Like, why should we do anything?
Well, because if our interests are to protect our allies, for one thing, then, allowing Iran's economy to come back so they can continue to fund Houthis in Yemen or continue to fund Hezbollah in Lebanon, then that's just not in our interests, because it's going to create greater problems down the line. And if we can, while the regime is so weak and has such low public support, if we can employ sanctions, and they saw what the economic upturn started to look like, and if we bring the sanctions back and those things that they just started to have back are beginning to go away, there's going to be massive public unrest. So this is one of the very few times that we have support from other countries, and we have also just the economic instability of Iran, that we can actually force a regime change while not putting any boots on the ground.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned their economy. They lost 5% of their economy because of this. To give an idea of what that would look like, that's about what happened in 2008 in the U.S. We lost 5%, and you saw what that did. Not that it's a perfect analogy, because there's no such thing, but it's 5%. We lost 5%, so that should give a pretty broad idea. Who does that affect?
Well, they also lost more than that. They lost, I don't know how you're measuring economy. They lost 20% of GDP, and they lost, what was it, 1/5 or half of their revenue is from oil, and that got cut in half. So that's, whatever the figure is. But who does that affect? That affects everyone in Iran.
Well, I mean, my source says 5%. And I'll share that with you. If you want to say 20%, I mean, fine. But what I'm getting at here is that the oil businessmen, they are the higher class, and because the price of oil goes up, it doesn't really it actually hurts the middle and lower classes. And right now they have a healthcare crisis, so it makes it harder for the middle and lower classes to have access to healthcare, because they have a very similar system to us, except they don't have anything like Medicaid or Medicare or et cetera, et cetera. They don't have that stuff. So it puts being able to afford healthcare extremely out of reach for the middle and lower class. Whereas at the same time, though, because the price of oil goes up, and actually China and Russia are still going to buy the oil. I think Russia, I know China will, or might be, there's another country. They're going to buy the oil if we're not going to buy it anyway. So, so it doesn't really hurt this upper class. And and of course the upper class has the same way in the United States, because they have more power, because they have, their money gives them more political influence. And it was really in this middle and lower class, they're really upset now, because they actually are the ones. It's like, for them, Rouhani, their leader Rouhani, he's kind of like Obama would be like here. And when I say that, I mean like people who voted for Obama. No matter how you feel about Obama, they were people who they were hurt in 2008. They were hurting around that time, and they thought that Obama was the guy who was going to help them and get us out of recession. I'm not trying. I mean, that's another discussion. I don't think really, but that's the person who went to the voting booth and voted for Obama. Like that's how they saw him. That's how the people felt about Rouhani, and their expectation with Rouhani was that he was going to negotiate this deal. And that happened, and now it fell through. So I mean, it's all diplomatic, is what I'm getting at. So I mean, I don't think you're gonna have a better. I just don't feel like you're gonna have a better deal than this. And the people who are affected negatively, and they're trying to work with the United States. Let me go ahead and say this too. And this is just an anecdote. But when I was growing up, my family were actually. My father, he became very close friends with an Iranian family, and they actually came here because of the political upheaval in Iran. So I've known all about this since I was a little kid. And I know that I don't feel like this regime is a good is good, but I don't feel like the intervention is necessary, and I don't feel like what it would be replaced with would be better. The same thing with Syria. I don't think what you're bringing in would be better.
Okay, so this is kind of my problem, is you approach it from this sort of, you bring up the healthcare, and you're kind of saying like it's not good for the people, and nobody's saying it is. Nobody's saying the sanctions are good for the people, but the entire problem is that the regime currently isn't good for the people, and allowing it to just be dragged out for who knows how long is just going to make things worse, potentially, but it's most likely not going to get better until it gets worse. And so by saying that, there are going to be some short-term negative effects, nobody is saying, sanction Iran to infinity. We're saying sanction Iran as a means of getting an outcome that we want. It's really nothing more than a bargaining tool. And the reason behind this is because, so would you agree that Iran only wants, nuclear stuff now in order for nuclear energy right now? That's their claim, right?
Well, they want it for medicine too, but for peaceful reasons.
Right. Yeah. So, but economically they want it because they'll be able to use more or use less of their own oil and sell more of it, essentially.
Well, essentially, I mean, someone could argue that nuclear is the future.
Yeah. So it's mainly for energy.
Yeah, it's mainly for energy.
And so my problem here is that if their goal is to sell more oil, and they truly have no ambitions to create a nuclear bomb, then they would just simply recognize that these sanctions are not going to go away, and they're actually going to end up with a worse economy than they would if they were either to just, not have nuclear energy, or, and I don't think that's very realistic, or if they were to just allow us to inspect wherever we want and say, okay, all sanctions are off the table. Because, I mean, regardless of the regime, that would be something that would get us to remove the sanctions if we could just inspect wherever we wanted.
Well, like I said, the IAEA can do that. They just have to have reasonable suspicion to go there, and then they say they're not up to anything. So I mean, I don't see, it's not within reason to just open up the door and let people come, especially when you're talking about your somebody like the United States. Because let's face it, we're not exactly friends here. So I mean, we wouldn't want to do that. Like if I would. Well, don't expect the United States to do the same thing for Iran, obviously, right?
Yeah, of course not. So, but that's kind of why I say I'm not approaching it from like this. We're morally equivalent here. I'm not saying that we would like afford them the same luxury, but the thing is, we have far more control over the Middle East, and this isn't even trying to come off as like a neocon talking point, like Ben Shapiro. I totally disagree with him on the majority of the stuff in the Middle East. But Iran is one thing that I agree with him on. And the problem is that there seems to just be this argument that, and the IAEA cannot just look wherever they want. Like you said, they have to have reasonable suspicion. And there's a list of places that we can look. And like I said, if we don't have, if somewhere that we want to look isn't on that list, we have to ask Iran. And so the thing is, like, if you're Iran and you know there are a list of places that you have at least a long forewarning that it's going to be inspected, why would you not develop nukes there if you were to want to do it? And if your goals were truly to just be able to sell as much oil as possible and increase your economy, then why wouldn't you just allow the inspections?
They do allow inspections. Yeah, like I said, the IEA inspected it. They said they don't have any reason. They don't believe that at all. It's just trying to find a reason to say they're not obeying the deal. Like, they're doing the same thing with ballistic missiles, but they can't prove that they changed the warhead. They're trying to say that they changed the warhead, and it's a whole separate list of sanctions. And I mean, like what I asked you before, I said, like, look, to build this weapon, they have to test it first, and they have to find out. They have to deliver. They have to have a way to deliver it, and then they have to test it. They can't just. And of course, they can only build one too, and it would take them a year to do it at this point. I mean, maybe a little under a year now, because now there's no agreement. So I mean, it's certainly better than nothing. Because I mean, what happens if you do nothing here?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly worse than nothing. But the thing, and nothing meaning no sanctions, but no deal with sanctions is absolutely not worse off. Because the thing is, they're just not going to have the money to sustain any sort of program if we keep sanctioning them how we do.
They'll have the money because like I said, the price of oil goes up, and that means that the upper class and the government, they still it balances out. So it really just hurts. I mean, it's the reason why. It's the same reason like why I actually don't believe in sanctioning Israel, believe it or not, because I don't think it would change anything, and I don't think it would give the Palestinians rights, or they would give up their nukes or whatever. I think it would just harm regular everyday people in Israel. It's not really any different than that. It harms the middle class. It's not going to bankrupt them from the nuclear thing. And I mean, the nuclear, they don't have a good reason to. Are the reasons, I guess, someone could say they're a good reason, but they're not the ones that. It's not a nuclear bomb. Okay, what they're worried about, and you've already mentioned it, is the fact that, and I mean, this is why these are the demands that Pompeo made. So it's not even about nuclear weapons. They have to stop funding Yemen, and they have to stop supporting Assad, basically. And because they're proxy situations with the Houthis and whatever bad guy. They're fighting bad guys who are worse, like ISIS, who Saudi Arabia funds. And I mean, they're not the greatest organization, but they were created as self-defense, because it's not Iran who is funding the conflict, these conflicts over there. It's Saudi Arabia. Or maybe not directly and indirectly, because Saudi Arabia. It's not a secret that they're allied with the Israelis. I mean, part of the peace plan that they expect that Abbas to accept, that he has to become an ally of Saudi Arabia, and he has to take a credit card from Saudi Arabia to rebuild Gaza and all this stuff. So I mean, people, like a lot of people, they think that like this whole idea, like with the religious sites in Jerusalem, like whose temple is it? They think that Israel. They don't realize like that Israel already controls all that, and the reason that it's still a mosque is because of Saudi Arabia. It has nothing to do with the Palestinians at all. It's because of the Saudi government.
Yeah. So I'm not seeing really where the argument against sanctions is coming in, because you're saying all these things so to go back to the nuclear, and so just to hash this out, because we've gone back and forth on this a couple times, the IAEA is not allowed to just unilaterally go in and search wherever they want. There are, I can't remember the places, trying to think, but there are places that we can't search just because we want to there, and we have to apply or not apply, but ask Iran. And then if they deny it, then, further process goes on. And so just to kind of maybe finish up on the nuclear aspect of it. If you could address that. And then the problem with the delivery system is, we've seen how fast a regime can test that with North Korea. The timing's so fitting, because it was so fast with North Korea, and North Korea is easier actually to deal with, because the only way that they're, even remotely sustainable is from China. Iran has all sorts of, like you said, other people, and China's one of them, but has all sorts of ways to remain, afloat.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think I've said this many times now. The IAEA doesn't think that they have the capability to deliver a weapon with bullets. They don't believe that they're building a bomb somewhere else. They've said that this over and over again. It's ridiculous to think that they would just let anyone into their military base without notice. They can, and it says very clearly in the deal that you can go there. Yeah, there's a process to it. If I can't convince you that they're supposed to let anyone just come into their military base and look anywhere for anything that they can find to claim that they're doing something wrong, we'll just have to leave it at that.
Yeah, I think we might have to, because the thing is it sounds like, why would Iran ever do that? Why would Iran let these people come in? And, presumably we tell people who they're, like Israel, we tell Israel what's going on in there or something like that. And that's, a national security for Iran, or a national security issue. But the thing is that Iran is they have no leverage. They're in no position to even deny us, because if we just continue sanctions, then it's going to get to a point where they just don't have even a military in the first place. And you say the oil prices will go up, and they will partially, but especially with this deal, Trump has just recently, I actually just saw this article this morning, and there were some other things. He talked to Saudi Arabia before pulling out of the Iran deal, and they guarantee that it's not going to have a negative economic impact on us. And Russia and Iran, or Russia and Saudi Arabia, are going to up oil exports to artificially lower the price, so that Iran can't benefit.
He did it for them. He did it for the Saudi Arabia. I mean, they probably had an agreement, but that's why beforehand that they would control the output if we did this one thing. But I mean, if you think about it, they can't really raise it too much right now for the reason that I already gave you, because it would help Iran. They can't raise it too much right away. They would have to wait for they would have to wait a while for the regime change. If that's the goal, they would have to wait for the regime change to raise the price anyway.
Right? Oh yeah, I meant they're raising exports in order to artificially keep the price lower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but what Haaretz is saying, they're saying that they talked in private about it. They said they can't be, but Saudi Arabia has suggested that it's true. But what I'm saying is that they can't raise the price too much right away. And I mean, the reason that I talked with Michael about this, and is because the Wall Street Journal, because it was reporting that at the time that the prices were going up. And of course, yeah, I mean, that was a month ago, and some things have changed since then. But I still think I think they're going to raise the price later, is what I'm getting at. So yeah, it's temporary, but it's leading towards a price hike.
Yeah, absolutely.
But my economic argument really has more to do with the EU and the fact that they negotiated. It's because this is a deal it's with us and the EU and Iran, and we backed out of it, and they already have their own economic problems, including ones like the steel tariffs with the Trump administration. They have all these other headaches. I mean, you've probably seen the photo of them at the trade summit, and the funny photo of Merkel looking at Trump.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, this is just like another, how do they know that they can trust us? I mean, when you talk about North Korea, like, how does North Korea know that they can? I mean, that worked out now, but I mean, how would a month going into that? I mean, how does that frames it? So like, if you make a deal with us, it's like how good is it going to be for?
Yeah.
But I think there's only 10 minutes left, and we've only really talked about the sanctions as far as a nuclear issue goes. So I don't know if you wanted. I know I wanted to really talk about some other stuff.
Oh yeah, happy to do that.
So yeah, I mean, I think it has more to do with Syria and Yemen, and no matter how you feel about that, because I mean, obviously you could say like, well, I don't like what Saudi Arabia does in Yemen, or I don't think that Hezbollah is any better than ISIS or Al Qaeda or et cetera, right? The thing is, no matter how you feel about this, what's the end result of this going to be? Because I mean, Iran, it doesn't matter. We don't have to do an economic. It wouldn't take any time for us to invade. Like, how long did it take to invade Iraq, right? So we have all the power in our hands anyway. So what they're going to do is they're going to step up their efforts in these proxy wars. They're going to fund them more. It's going to escalate this situation in Yemen. It's going to escalate the situation in Syria. And it really has more to do, like, as far as like, how does Israel benefit? It's because they are fighting. It's out in the open now. It's a proxy war, and that they're fighting this. Israel's really fighting Assad, and they're losing that proxy war. I mean, like, the first thing they did the next day was they blew up all these targets in Syria, right? And now they're saying they want Russia and Assad. That they have to get Iran out of there because they're very strong allies. So it has more. I think they're really a lot more concerned about that. But I think it would be better if the United States just didn't have a hand in this at all, because well, I mean, the people who they're fighting, we gave money to these so-called rebel groups that are really they're whatever brand, they're Al Qaeda, they're their own
right.
terror. They're these terrorist brands. We were fighting them in Iraq, and Syria helped us fight these same people in Iraq. But now we're giving them money to fight Assad. And I mean, as far as like Assad is actually, in comparison to Saudi Arabia, he's actually a much more fair leader. If you wanted to compare our values, he's actually closer to our values than Saudi Arabia is, because it's a kingdom. It's not anything like a democracy. Assad's actually elected, and he would actually be considered kind of a left for the Arab world. I mean, obviously not here, and he was educated in Britain and so forth and so on. And I mean, his family, they've always been fighting. I mean, they've been fighting the Israelis since 48, if not. Yeah. I mean, there's been a declared war since 67.
Yeah, I don't think we'll disagree on much in Syria. I'm not for regime change in Syria at all or anything like that. But going back to what you said, where if we increase sanctions, they're just going to basically up funding for Hezbollah and the Houthis. I just don't think that that's going to be. So here's the thing. That's like multifaceted, because one, they're just going to be so broke from sanctions, and they will be able to sell some oil, but they're absolutely going to take a hit. And we've seen the hit that they took last time. In, I think it was 2 years, they had like 56% inflation or something insane. But and like you said, that's mainly affecting the middle class. But that goes back to my argument that the people are not, their concern is not whether or not they are helping the Yemeni people or what's going on in Lebanon. Their concern is with the fact that they have 20% unemployment, like 40% of them have, I think was the number, have some issue with getting healthcare, like you said. And if they just see that their leaders are just continuing to fund problematic groups in other places, I just don't see that. I don't think that they're going to stand for that much longer. And, maybe if Iran had the backing of the people, I would reconsider this, but they just absolutely don't. And so it's a very unique time for us to be able to actually do something without invading, which would be less than ideal.
I mean, well, the people, they elected Rouhani to do this stuff, and he did it. And now, I mean, it doesn't mean anything. So, what do you expect them to do?
I think this just goes back to where we kind of disagree on the deal, and how we just can't agree that the IAEA inspections are enough or are, able to be unilateral enough to inspect something that we think is problematic without caring whether or not Iran wants us to.
Okay, I know I can't convince you that they should just let anyone into their military base, but let's assume that we were people in Iran who were hardliners and didn't want people to negotiate with the United States.
Hmm.
How do you think we would feel about just letting anyone into a military base as part of this?
You'd feel very badly about it, but you'd also be a pretty small minority in your country as far as hardline anti-West now, as far as the lower classes go.
But not really. I mean, it's the same thing here. It's kind of like the left-right thing, like where right wingers in Iran they don't want to negotiate with the United States. It's really more of like a left-wing thing. That's why I compared Rouhani to Obama. Like he's kind of like Obama, and his role was a lot like Obama's to rebuild the economy and negotiate something with the United States where they can rebuild their economy. And he did that, and now it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, but the difference here is that, these people who are hardline in America aren't suffering massive economic consequences. And so being a hardliner in America doesn't come at any cost. It really doesn't. In comparison to what it costs in Iran. Like these people, they have no economy.
So you voted for Rouhani because you can't afford health care and you're having trouble supporting your family. And now this deal fell through. How do you feel about the United States?
Well, I mean, I've seen many people are upset about it, but people also accept that there's blame within their own government in Iran. This is part of the thing, is the people don't care about a nuclear program. They don't care about anything to do with their military because it's not likely that Israel is just going to like come in and just force some regime change, or the Saudis are going to go do something like that, or that the Americans would even allow for something like that in terms of a military invasion. Like this is something that is very organically changing, and that, like with him being elected, even it shows that the people want to be more progressive and aligned with the West more. But the West isn't just going to accept any sort of deal that we are given. And that's the problem, is that people it's going to be on our terms, because this has been a regime that funds terrorism for a long time. And so there's really no negotiating to be even done. This is no cost to us. This is basically our way or no way, because we just there's no cost to us to do this. And we don't want these funded groups in Yemen and Lebanon to just continue to exist and cause problems to America.
Mm. Why doesn't Iran recognize Israel?
Why doesn't Iran? I don't know. They've just been opposed to Israel for a long time. So it's a pretty broad question.
Well, that's actually not. They've actually said since the founding of Israel that they would recognize Israel if they would just get out of they don't even have to stop doing what they're doing to the Palestinians, at least in their statement from the 1940s. They just have to get out of Jerusalem because they're occupying. They just have to stop occupying Jerusalem. So what are they doing so for them, the Israelis are trying. I mean, so basically it's basically the holy war aspect of this is what I'm trying, because there's a minute left. So if they would just get out, if they would just solve the Jerusalem issue, then they would get out of there. So that's the core of this. And I mean, we're talking about who they're helping, who these groups. I mean, they're helping the Palestinians, they're helping Lebanese from an invasion, they're helping Syria from an invasion. I mean, I don't think the U.S. But as far as the U.S. is concerned, I don't think that we should be involved. And I think that sanctions, specifically the sanctions, they're not for good reasons, and they harm the wrong people. And because the demands can't be met to stop supporting the Houthis and to stop supporting groups in Syria, that's not going to happen. It's going to escalate. So I don't think there's an equality of outcome that the United States should go for in this situation.
Yeah, so I think that pretty much wraps it up. I'll just say briefly, I think we're seeing the difference between a kind of moral approach to things and an unapologetic sort of America first approach to things, where we're not necessarily. I'm actually just going to wrap it up now, but I think that's kind of what it boils down to. But regardless, it was a good discussion. Happy to talk to you.